Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook. On this week's show, we update the Destination Reeve Street project and a recent survey that was conducted of residents and business owners about how they feel about the lane realignment for Port Hawkesbury's most well-traveled street. Later on in the show, I'll sit down with Veronica Merryfield, the founder of the Cape Breton Transgender Network, as part of our ongoing Telile 24/7 coverage of Pride Month. You'll also hear about some other special events coming up in the Strait area later this spring and into the summer, and we're going to get responses from Nova Scotia's Minister of Education, Becky Druhan, about two recent issues that we've been following here on Telile 24/7. But we begin with the Strait-Richmond Hospital and the realignment of its outpatients department. The Nova Scotia Health Authority implemented a new model for the ER for the Strait-Richmond this week, and it could mean that the ER isn't open at times when you might expect it to be. To get the specifics on what this new model for the ER means and how long it could have to stay in place, I sat down earlier this week with Angela MacArthur, who is the Director of Rural Health for the Eastern Zone of the Nova Scotia Health Authority. Here's our conversation about the changes at the Strait-Richmond Hospital right now. And now joining us from her office in Inverness is the Director of Rural Health for the Eastern Zone of the Nova Scotia Health Authority. She is Angela MacArthur. Ms. MacArthur, thank you for joining me on Telile 24/7 today.
Thanks very much for inviting me.
We have you here to explain what exactly is happening to the emergency room at the Strait-Richmond Hospital in Evanston. A new ER model took shape this week. Can you give us some details on what exactly is going to happen now that this new model is in place?
Sure. So we started a new patient capacity process at the Strait that we announced this week, and really what that means is that day to day we will be looking, several times through the day, looking at our capacity on the unit and taking into account the number of stretchers we have, the number of staff we have in the department, how seriously ill the patients are, the number of patients that we have registered. We'll take all that into account, and we may have to make decisions on days that the department has been advertised as being open with a physician to close early because we have reached capacity, and that we may, stay closed for it maybe several hours until we can free up a space, or until the department changes. Maybe, we've seen some patients, we've moved patients, to home, to another facility, and we may be able to reopen, or it may actually have to stay closed until the physician comes back another day.
So we're getting a sense now on what exactly would it be required to reopen the ER. Can you give me a sense on how much time would be given and how much notice would be given in terms of closing the ER for the day, and just the uncertainty that goes with knowing that it could be an extended period of time before that ER is reopened? What process is involved there in the closure part?
Sure. So right now, we do have several processes when we close the department, or when the department is going to be closed. So at the Strait-Richmond Hospital, the department is typically open a few days a week, and that's based on when we have physician coverage. We have one physician that regularly provides care at the Strait in the emergency department, with, maybe some sporadic coverage from other part-time or locum type physician. So we always have that advertised on our closure policy, our closure website, the Nova Scotia Health website, where we have the closures posted. As well, we have a sign outside the department with open and closed right on the sign. So when we need to close because of capacity, our challenge will be, again, getting that message out in a timely manner. So again, we would put that on the closure website, on our website right away. We would also change the sign right away. But that is, typically, we'll provide as much notice as we can, but unfortunately, those capacity issues often necessitate us to do that right away.
So there is, and I'm not asking this to dramatize the situation,
Sure.
but there is a distinct possibility that somebody could get in their car from Mulgrave or St. Peter's or Petit de Gras, drive to the ER at the Strait-Richmond and find abruptly that it's closed when they check the sign on the door.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I wanted to get a sense on what went into the decision to implement this ER model and this open enclosure model. Was it a lack of physicians? Was it a lack of nursing staff? Was it the long list of patients that use this ER? What can you tell me about what went into making this decision?
Sure. So really, many of the points you just mentioned certainly would have led to some of the decisions. So as I mentioned earlier, we do only have one physician that regularly provides service to the emergency department at the Strait. So we do have several days of the week that the ER is closed. As well, we have several RN vacancies at the Strait-Richmond Hospital, and specifically on the medical unit, which really impacts our ability to admit patients. So right now we have 7 RN vacancies on the nursing unit. And we also have vacancies in what we would call our RN float positions. We have 4 of those positions in the facility, and 3 of those are vacant right now. So just in the nursing unit alone, we do have 10 RN vacancies. So again, really impacting our ability to, care for patients on the nursing unit, which again would add to the capacity issues in the emergency department if we can't admit patients.
Now, obviously, this is not the sort of situation that you can mark a date on a calendar and say, we'll have our full nursing staff by here, or we'll have a doctor by here. Obviously, people at different levels of government have been trying to figure that out for the better part of 25 years and still haven't cracked the formula. That being said, what is your sense in working with, for example, the Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health Committee and with the province's new Office of Healthcare Professional Recruitment, that these vacancies could be filled either in whole or in part? What's your feeling about trying to fill these gaps?
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's a difficult question to answer. We appreciate that. This is very concerning, and the priority for us is always patient care and patient safety. And as you mentioned, we're working closely with Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health, as well as our recruitment teams, both for physicians and nursing staff. And, just to give you a better idea of some of the things that we have been doing for recruitment, there are incentives on our positions at the Strait, on our RN positions. We've reached out to new grads and the nursing schools. We have reached out to travel nursing and some locum nurses. But again, it's a really hard question. We will continuously be, reflecting on, as we get new staff, how we can make changes. And again, as far as physician recruitment, that will really impact our ability to open the emergency department more days of the week.
Now, this is a question I asked just to be pragmatic for our viewers. So essentially, if they don't get an open ER by the time they get there, or the ER is already closed by the time they would consider going to the Strait-Richmond, what options are available to them? You'd mentioned earlier that there would be a possibility that they could be seen in other healthcare complexes or by other medical professionals, or simply that their case would be referred to another date or another situation. Can you elaborate a little on what options are open when the Strait-Richmond ER is closed, even if it's a quick closure?
Sure. So we would always advise patients to call 811 if it's more, to speak to a nurse or for advice, and, absolutely to call 911 in an emergency, or go to the nearest open emergency department, or to call their family physician, to see if it were possible to get an appointment, or again, represent to an emergency department if it will be open the next day. Yeah, so those are, always the options and what we advertise certainly for people to call 911 if it's an emergency.
Mhm. This obviously, Ms. MacArthur, is not an interview you take any great joy in having, and it's not news you take any great joy in delivering to the people in the coverage area of the Strait-Richmond Hospital. That being said, as we wind down here, what can you say to those people that might be watching now, just from your office and from the Nova Scotia Health Authority, in terms of trying to settle this situation in the short term as opposed to the long term?
Yeah, and I guess, I just, again, appreciate that the change is very concerning, and, that we knew we had to do something different. And that certainly it's a model that we can support at this time with the staff we have. And certainly our goal is to, to continue to recruit and to get back to a place where we do have an emergency department open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as well as an acute medical unit that we have nursing staff to support.
We've covered a lot of ground, Ms. MacArthur. I appreciate you giving me some time here. Did you want to add anything else about all this just before we wrap up?
No, just again, thank you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share, these changes with the community. Thank you.
No trouble at all. We appreciate you giving us some time. Angela MacArthur is the Director of Rural Health for the Eastern Zone of the Nova Scotia Health Authority, and we've been speaking to her today from her office at the Inverness Consolidated Memorial Hospital. If you watched last week's edition of Telile 24/7, you might remember that I interviewed the director of the Strait Regional Centre for Education, Paul Landry, about the removal of the mask mandate that was in effect in Nova Scotia schools until May 24th. We had hoped to have some conversation with Education Minister Becky Druhan about this same issue. However, while she is unavailable for an interview at the present time, according to Education Department officials, she did release a statement regarding the removal of the mask mandate and the general climate in this stage of the COVID-19 pandemic in Nova Scotia public schools. Here's what Minister Druhan had to say. I appreciate the strong feelings on both sides of the masking questions. For students and staff, masks are optional but continue to be recommended. Everyone, students, staff, outside service providers, volunteers, and visitors will be supported if they want to wear a mask in schools. Masks have served the purpose of enabling more students to attend school regularly while community transmission was increasing. This allowed students access to learning, friends, and other supports, including mental health support. A supply of masks and hand sanitizer continues to be available to students and staff. It's been 3 years since Port Hawkesbury approved the realignment of lanes along Reeve Street as part of the Destination Reeve Street pilot project, and the town is preparing to submit its final report to its partner in the project, Nova Scotia's Department of Public Works, later this fall. However, the town is also carrying out surveys of its residents and business owners to get a sense of what they feel about the 3-lane alignment that replaced the traditional 4-lane alignment for Reeve Street. The survey was carried out by Narrative Research, and pollster Don Mills could appear before Town Council very soon to explain the results. I spoke to the Mayor of Port Hawkesbury, Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, just hours after the town received the survey results, just before the Town Council meeting that was held at the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre last week. Here's a recap of what happened on that day and what's going to happen now. Narrative Research spent 4 weeks taking the pulse of Port Hawkesbury residents, business owners, and others in April and May. The survey's questions circled around the effectiveness of the replacement of the previous 4-lane configuration for Reeve Street with a 3-lane alignment that includes strategic turning zones near businesses and public facilities along the 1-kilometer stretch of provincially owned highway. According to Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, the figures will now go to 2 levels of municipal council discussion.
Well, that data is certainly hot off the press, so hot in fact that we haven't had a chance to review it yet, but it can certainly speak to the process. So we do have a Reeve Street Advisory Committee. So step one would be, of course, to share this data with that committee and have a review at the committee level. And then pending that there is enough time and, the logistics work, we will be having a presentation of this data to Council at our Committee of the Whole the third Tuesday of this month.
Port Hawkesbury Town Council is also hoping to have the veteran pollster that headed up the narrative research survey on Reeve Street, Don Mills, appear before Council to give his thoughts on the data that was collected. In the meantime, even though she doesn't have final numbers on the exact amount of participation, Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton is confident that Port Hawkesbury residents have been engaged about the future of Reeve Street.
Reeve Street has been certainly a conversation point over the last couple of years. And, we've gotten some great constructive feedback with regard to, what's working really well, what needs a little bit of tweaking. So all of that feedback that we're getting from citizens is extremely important because at the end of the day, we want to have the absolute safest street for residents as well as for people in the area that are regular users of Reeve Street in their everyday usage.
In the meantime, Nova Scotia's Department of Public Works will also conduct a traffic count along Reeve Street this summer, which will be presented to Town Council in the fall, just before Council makes its final presentation to the province on whether to continue with the 3-year-old Destination Reeve Street pilot project. As part of our ongoing Pride Month coverage here on Telile 24/7, I had the opportunity to sit down with the founder of the Cape Breton Transgender Network at our Telile studios. Her name is Veronica Merryfield, and her tale of how she came to be where she is right now, both geographically and in terms of her identity, goes back to when she was 4 years old growing up in England. Here is Veronica Merryfield's story right now. And we're pleased to welcome to the Telile studios this week for a conversation that ties into our Pride Month coverage, the head of the Cape Breton Transgender Network and the founder of the network and a board member for Cape Breton Pride. She is Veronica Merryfield. Veronica, thank you for joining us here on Telile 24/7.
Thank you for asking me to come.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I wanted to begin by asking for a bit of the history of the Cape Breton Transgender Network. You founded it. How did it all start, and what need did you see that you really wanted to fill with this particular organization?
Okay, so I came to Cape Breton in 2016 and got involved in supporting parents, children, adults who were transitioning or part of the transgender network. But I didn't have a lot of visibility, and people were finding it hard to find somebody to reach out to get support. So I ended up creating the network to both create that visibility so that I could be found, so they could be helped, and to create a better supporting community.
So what has the reaction been like? Have you found that people have been coming to you and to your group?
Yeah, I run a support group for adults. I have a number of speaking engagements that come out of it to help and educate. And I have people coming to ask for help. They find me some way, and then start asking the questions that they need answered.
All right, that's terrific. Speaking of education, we want to take a moment to share with our viewers that you are wearing the colors of the transgender flag.
I am indeed wearing the colors of the transgender flag.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize, we have the pride flag up as our backdrop behind us right now, but there are as many as 6 different flags representing different corners of the LGBTQI community. Could there be even more?
There's even more. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of flags that represent the various presentations of gender variation and sexuality variation.
Now, not only are you the head of the Cape Breton Transgender Network, you also serve on the board for Cape Breton Pride, and your particular role on the board is education. So can you tell us a little bit about what you and your colleagues are doing right at this moment, and what kind of initiatives and programs you have to better educate Cape Bretoners about LGBTQIA issues?
So right now we're in the throes of organising the Pride Week for August, flag raising on August the 5th, parade on August the 6th. In my particular role, I'm also organising the Living Library event, where we have a number of speakers who will come to speak for a short time about aspects of their life, and it'll be a varied set of conversations. And I'm also organising the vigil on the Thursday, which I believe is incredibly important to remember those who've lost their lives for all sorts of reasons. The suicide rates are pretty high. There's rates of homicide around the world. And this needs to be remembered, that the LGBTQI plus community has quite a lot of losses. So those are my particular ones for now. But generally, I think it's fair to say that all of the board do what they can for education. Education is so important, but to coordinate those education sessions is kind of what I do on the board.
You mentioned you've been in Cape Breton for 5 years. You're living in Marion Bridge now. Can you give me a sense of what you feel the lay of the land is right now for acceptance and inclusion of the LGBTQIA community? Because many of us that are here have been here for years. We've seen that it's been extremely difficult, especially in rural areas. What is your sense of how things are now for the community and for general acceptance of the community?
That's a very interesting question, is the response. It's very variable. There are certain aspects where acceptance is not a problem. There's a lot of lovely people, and we just get on with our lives. But also, in some of the work that I've been doing, I've become a target to the point of getting death threats. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in Cape Breton. And to be honest, there's a lot of work that needs to be done nationally, which is why I get involved nationally too. But then on the world stage, we're doing really well compared to some countries, but we're doing not so well against some other countries. So there's still a lot of mileage. Yeah.
Does it hearten you to see communities like the Strait area starting to hold public pride events? Before this interview, I had spoken to you about Taylor Linloff, who is the pride facilitator in Port Hawkesbury for the 3rd year in a row. They have worked with you, and you've had conversations with them. Does it bring you some joy and some hope to know that pride events are not only happening outside of the Sydney area, but that they're happening for 3 years running now in places like Port Hawkesbury?
Yeah, so shout out to Taylor for the work they're doing. It's incredible. I am really pleased to see more areas doing pride events. It's heartening to see that the Richmond area is doing this. It was heartening to see Eskazoni doing it, and I'm currently helping the folks at Antigonish do stuff too. These communities are really rallying behind this. I was at the high school in Antigonish a week ago to speak to the entire high school. So, and at their flag raising. So this is a big thing, and this kind of spread is good. These kind of pride celebrations are not just restricted to large cities. The population is spread through rural communities, and it's good to celebrate.
Now, one of the reasons I did want to have you join me here in the Telile studios is because of your own personal story. You've said you have a willingness to share that with me, and you do that as part of your role as an educator. Obviously, this goes back many years, and it has a great impact on your heart and your outlook to this day. Yep. Can you tell us your own personal story of the evolution into Veronica, basically?
I'm very happy to share that story. Good. So, despite my looks, I'm 55. I was born in the East End of London in the UK. Grew up in Southampton. My parents are, I think it's probably best to say, fairly cult religious types. I was raised male. At 4 years old, I realised I wasn't, but I couldn't deal with that as a 4-year-old. But etched in my memory is that moment. I can remember that hot summer day. I can remember the sound of the birds in the sky, the kids in the street that were playing, the smell of the cut grass. It's still, that visual is very much there, that moment where I knew that things weren't right and who I was. It took me until I was 8 years old to pluck up enough courage to ask for help, but I was denied, and I was given a fairly stringent religious lecture. And after that, I pretty much I felt on my own for a lot of things, which has its consequences in later life with mental health. It wasn't until post-university and moving out to being on my own that I sought my own help, and went down the transgender path because that's what that's where it was going. This was, even then in the 90s, it wasn't particularly well supported in the UK. I had to go use private help where I could. I had to do a lot of things for myself. And it was during that journey that it was discovered I was intersexed. So I could equally have worn an intersex flag today, and that's yellow and purple circle. I've since discovered in more recent years that a lot of people who thought they were transgender were intersexed. I'm part of an intersex community, and there's a lot of us who went through very similar paths. So that's where I get to now. I have a history with suicide survival, and it's the suicide and prevention part of what I do that really drives me. I want to save lives, and it's really hard to know how many you save, but it's really easy to see how many do take their own life. And that's a really hard thing to deal with each time it happens. So,
we appreciate you being so honest about your own story, and you talking about suicide and about how many experience these feelings. And Taylor Linloff, the Port Hawkesbury Pride facilitator, they have really been promoting a slogan they've come up with: Pride saves lives. And on the surface, it's a slogan, but it really goes much deeper than that. So can you talk for just a moment about the idea that the importance of being free within someone's own identity is critical, not only to their living day to day, but in some cases to their living at all?
To their living at all, absolutely. The statistics probably speak the loudest. Most transgender people, like 90%, talk about having some sort of suicide history, and around 60% have actually tried to take their own lives, which would indicate that there's a large number out there who succeeded in taking their lives. Societal expectations of heteronormativity push people to think that they need to conform, and trying to fit yourself into that conformation doesn't work, and that is enough to push people to take their life. That's why visibility is so important. People need to know that there's people like me out here who have been there, done it, got the dress, and are willing to speak up, are willing to be seen, are willing to be there, are willing to campaign, are willing to be activists, are willing to advocate, and that's why I do what I do.
Now, you mentioned visibility, and one of the things that has struck me in recent months is how we are seeing more visibility among the trans community. And I mean, we even look to the recent provincial election. Lisa Lachance, the NDP MLA for Halifax Citadel Sable Island, the first trans MLA in Nova Scotia. And a lot of people talk about Matea Roach on Jeopardy, but of course we know she was preceded just a couple of months earlier by Amy Schneider, who had that great run. So do you get that sense that we're seeing it more and more, that there is that visibility for the transgender and non-binary community, even just here in Nova Scotia?
I do, and I speak with kind of like a near 30-year history here. And I have a good friend who transitioned 30 years before me, and we've talked about this, how the visibility has raised in all of those years, how it's got so much better, and the advances are getting better because of that accelerative effect of visibility. But that visibility means that a lot of people are able to be themselves. And some of those people have spent, best part of their adult life hiding because they don't think that they could come out, let alone, seeing the children who are transitioning now. And it's remarkable to see that kind of change in sort of primary and middle school education, and to see supported kids that are able to come out and be themselves, and the difference that makes, as opposed to those who have to wait until now and they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s before they can make that change. It's a huge deal. It really is.
Recent census figures as well indicating that not only are we seeing a record high number of Canadians identifying as transgender and non-binary, but Nova Scotia actually has the highest provincial percentage of those identifying as such in the entire country. What did you think when you saw those figures?
So Nova Scotia, BC and the Yukon scored the most highly in that. The percentages were higher than I've seen in other statistics, international statistics, but I think visibility is starting to play a part in that. It's not that any of us didn't exist beforehand, it's that we weren't able to be ourselves. I think the political history of gender affirming care in these provinces is probably why those numbers are higher. I have no idea whether there's any migration to Nova Scotia by those who are looking for care. I would hope that perhaps if that is the case, then at least they found somewhere where that care is better than it is in some other provinces. But I think there's a general openness here that maybe there hasn't been in some other provinces. But I think that goes to political history here.
Yeah. Speaking of political history, I can't have a conversation with you without speaking of the battle that you have waged against conversion therapy, not just locally, but nationally. And I know that became a political football just a couple of years ago and seemed to go down along party lines at the federal level. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in this regard and also why you were so forceful in making sure that conversion therapy doesn't happen in Canada?
Okay, so I'll start with the last part of that question. My own history involves being pushed through conversion therapy, and it does some very destructive effects to a person's self-validation. It takes away and erases a lot of their identity in what is deemed to be a way to cure. It doesn't work. It often results in suicides. There have been a number of attempts for conversion therapy banning in Canada. I got involved in when C6 was being banded around, mainly because the wording that I saw in it wasn't litigable. Using words like against somebody's will is not something you can prove or disprove in court. Therefore, it would be a piece of litigation law that doesn't have teeth to be enforced, and that's why I got involved. And I was fairly public in the paper, and I managed to get an audience with the team at the Attorney General's office. We talked about this and why it was an issue, but at that point it was running through the House at committee stage, running up to a summer recess and then what turned out to be the election. So that fell off the order book. But there was a commitment that they would bring it back, and I had been advocating for a full ban. And if they couldn't do a full ban, then the wording needed to be changed so it could be litigable. So they came back and they had a full ban in place as that piece of legislation, C4, which I still believe is probably the fastest piece of legislation to go from tabling to passing with royal assent. But there's a lot of us who are involved in that. Whilst I was advocating it for it here, there are a lot of people around the country advocating for it. And a lot of us spoke out and did what we needed to do to push politicians to do this. I was very thankful that it did go through because I really didn't want to have to appear at committee stage to testify, but I was willing to do it. And I know a lot of others did testify. I'm now on the board of a national Conversion Therapy Survivors non-profit organisation as a communication director. There's a lot of work still to be done, both for the survivors who it's a difficult thing to recover from. It's a difficult thing for professionals to help those recovering from. There's not enough research or understanding in it. But I'm also still fearful that in some ways conversion therapy can happen behind closed doors. So it's something I've got in my mind to be careful of and what we might need to do in the future.
So we're not done having this conversation, unfortunately.
I don't think we're done having this conversation. I think a lot of people think it is done, but I know there are still organisations out there, as you said, along party lines, that would be pushing to try and reverse the ban. So it indicates that there's still issues out there. And, you know, there's other countries are following suit. France and New Zealand followed Canada fairly quickly in getting their bans in place. But back in England, where a ban was put forward at the Parliament, they singled out not providing that ban for those that were transgender, so they could still be subjected to conversion therapy. So yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done worldwide. And we weren't the first to put the ban through, but we were early. I hope to see it done in the rest of the world.
We are winding down this conversation, and I want to ask you, in your present day, what would you say to that 4-year-old back in England? Phrases like "it gets better" start to become cliche, but what would you say about where you are now and how far you have come and the pain you've gone through, but to know that it does get better to a degree?
So thank you for acknowledging the pain. Yes, there's been a lot of it. I have issues with the "it gets better" because that implies that it's okay that it's not better now, and it should be better now. I think if my 4-year-old self were in primary education now, I would have a better chance. I still don't think my 4-year-old self would necessarily understand what was going on. I don't know what I would tell my 4-year-old self, but I don't think my 4-year-old self would have come forward to talk because she didn't know what to do. And that's where education in a broader sense comes in, so that parents are able to spot some of the telltales. And this is a kind of a sub-project that I'm currently working on, is talking to parents who have transgender children to talk about what they saw beforehand with the knowledge of what they know now, to see if we can put together better guides to help parents spot this. Most transgender people, children included, don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. It's complicated, particularly as a 4-year-old.
We have covered a lot of ground over the course of the last few minutes, as I thought we might, and I greatly appreciate that. Veronica, would you like to add anything else just before we wrap up here?
I'm here, I'm visible, I'm here to help. People can find me through the Cape Breton Transgender Network. The website is cbtn.ca. Or you can find me on Facebook. I have a fairly public profile. I'm open and available for anybody that needs help or anybody that wants some education, and I'm open to come to organisations to help do that.
Well, we appreciate you giving us a few moments to talk about many different aspects of this conversation, and it is a multifaceted conversation, and doing so with such honesty and dignity. Veronica Merryfield, thank you for joining me on Telile 24/7 today.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Veronica Merryfield is the founder of the Cape Breton Transgender Network and serves as the education coordinator on the board of Cape Breton Pride. Stay tuned for more of Telile 24/7 in just a moment. Pride Month isn't the only thing happening in the town of Port Hawkesbury this month. As a matter of fact, there are going to be a number of special events taking place with cultural significance over the next few weeks, leading up to the return of Port Hawkesbury's big marquee summer events, the Festival of the Strait and the Granville Green Free Outdoor Concert Series in July. But first of all, here's Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton reflecting on the fact that this past Sunday afternoon at the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre, the Philippine flag was raised as part of Filipino Independence Day celebrations. Here's the mayor talking about what Strait Area Filipinos, and in particular the Strait Area Filipino Society, has meant to the running of the town and the overall flavor of the community over the past few years.
The Strait Area Filipino Society is, just such an amazing group of individuals. And anytime they get together, they're always so welcoming, and they always include an invitation to me as mayor of the town. And I just can't say enough about what a wonderful community. And they're business owners, they're volunteers in our community. They give so much to our community, just contributing to the Cape Breton Christmas for Seniors every year. They'll be participating and helping to contribute and partner with our June Pride Month activities this year as well. So we are so pleased to support Philippines Independence Day.
But this past weekend's Filipino Independence Day isn't the only cultural celebration taking place at the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre this month. This coming Tuesday, June the 21st, it's National Indigenous Peoples Day. And as Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton will tell you, this day is significant not just because June is National Indigenous History Month, but also since we've now passed the one-year anniversary of the first discovery of unmarked graves at several former residential school sites.
June is really a big month, and we do celebrate Aboriginal History Month for the entire month of June. And particularly so, Council is always super supportive and pleased to raise the Mi'kmaq flag on June 21st to celebrate International Aboriginal Day as well. So it's important that we continue not only to acknowledge and participate in truth and reconciliation and do our best to continue to build bridges with the Unama'ki communities here in Cape Breton Island, but really it's about truth and reconciliation. It's about, putting action behind truth and reconciliation. So the town of Port Hawkesbury certainly is proud to support raising the flag on the 21st of June.
The town is also looking at other ways to cooperate with local Mi'kmaq communities. Town officials are currently negotiating with the Strait Regional Centre for Education on the possibility of opening up the Strait Area Pool based at the Sarek High School site for July 17th and 18th to allow aquatic events to be held there as part of this year's Mi'kmaq Summer Games being held in Boudreau First Nation.
Typically, the Mi'kmaq Summer Games rotate to different Unama'ki communities, and of course this year Boudreau First Nation will be hosting the Mi'kmaq Summer Games in the month of July. So Council at our last Committee of the Whole had asked that I reach out to Boudreau to see if there's anything that the town of Port Hawkesbury can do in kind to support the Summer Games, whether it's using any of our rec fields, tennis courts, or in this circumstance, pool. So we were able to hear back from the organizers of the Mi'kmaq Summer Games and Boudreau, and they asked if they could host their aquatic Summer Games events at the Sarek Pool or at the Port Hawkesbury Pool. So of course, Council was unanimous in their support of being able to offer in-kind support for the Summer Games for Boudreau, and they're our neighbors, and we're very, very happy and pleased to be able to provide some support.
Now, the Strait Area Pool is typically closed during the month of July for maintenance and cleaning. But in addition to the Mi'kmaq Summer Games, there's a possibility that the pool could be open on 2 occasions during the month of July, specifically on the first couple of days of the month to be able to accommodate aquatic activities for another event returning to Port Hawkesbury after a lengthy absence, this one pandemic-induced, the Festival of the Strait, Port Hawkesbury's flagship community event.
So after what seems like 10 years of COVID, the Festival of the Strait is easing in to having a festival after some, cancellations over the last couple of years for obvious health reasons. So this year, we're really hoping to be able to use the pool as a venue to have some family swims, and so that folks are able to also have access to accessible facilities and activities during Festival of the Strait. And we have wonderful accessible equipment and infrastructure at the pool. So everyone of all ages and abilities will be able to participate in a free swim during Festival of the Strait this year. So very pleased the council is also unanimously supportive of hosting some swims for Festival of the Strait this year.
And for the first time in 3 years, Port Hawkesbury's Granville Green bandshell will be buzzing once again, as the town has unveiled its Granville Green Resurgent lineup for the free outdoor concert series getting underway on July 3rd and continuing until August the 7th.
I think our Granville Green is aptly named as Resurgence, and we are coming back on a mission, and we know how valued and how much our surrounding communities, including the town of Port Hawkesbury, looks forward to the free summer concert series. And it really is something special, and it's become part of the fabric of our community each and every summer. So it's been tough not to be able to kind of host that. Of course, we looked for kind of innovative, safer ways to kind of share some music in our communities despite COVID. So we kind of had traveling concert that over the last 2 summers. I think they were both on Canada Day and at other times. So that was something, but it's not the same. It's not Granville Green. It's not bring your chairs and catch up with your neighbors and friends that you haven't seen in some time. And really, it's about the community gathering, and it's about wonderful music as well. So we are looking forward to our Granville Green Resurgence this year. We have an amazing lineup that has been revealed.
And with Granville Green, the Festival of the Strait, and other activities set to return after a long pandemic hibernation, the mayor is hopeful that Port Hawkesbury, the surrounding communities, and visitors to the Strait area will feel a healing in getting together that's been a long time coming for this neck of the woods.
We really hope that we're able to bring some joy to our surrounding communities, to our region, to visitors that are coming to Cape Breton, Unama'ki. We feel like the summer, I think, is going to be it's going to be interesting. I think that there's a demand to be made for people to come and visit not only our Granville Green Concert Series in the town of Port Hawkesbury, but a lot of communities across the region of the Strait and Cape Breton and Unama'ki. I hope that we have lots of great visitors, and that not only do they enjoy their visit to our island, but that they decide to return for another visit or maybe to become a permanent resident. So I'm really looking forward to the summer and what opportunity it brings.
We have another prepared statement from the Education Minister for Nova Scotia, Becky Druhan, concerning an issue that we've been following here on Telile 24/7. Minister Druhan and the Minister responsible for Acadian Affairs, Colton LeBlanc, met with officials with the Conseil scolaire acadien provincial to discuss the Francophone School Board's drive to have a new bill passed in the House of Assembly that would enshrine French language education rights. Now, while Minister Druhan did not consent to doing a full interview with Telile 24/7 on this issue, she did release the following statement to us just last week. Nova Scotia's Acadian and Francophone communities and the province's French language, heritage, and culture are an important piece of our province's fabric. Minister LeBlanc and I met recently with the president of the Conseil scolaire acadien provincial to hear about their unique needs in the context of the work of the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. We had excellent discussion with the CSAP and will continue to work with the Acadian and Francophone communities. Those of you that have been following Telile 24/7 through the spring might remember that just a couple of weeks ago, I had an interview with the Deputy Mayor of Port Hawkesbury, Jason O'Coin, who is also the head of Port Hawkesbury's Planning Advisory Committee. We talked about 3 motions that have come out of planning advisory stages and gone to public hearing on May 26th. However, 2 of these rezoning motions were sent back to the Planning Advisory Committee, and as part of the fallout from that May 26th hearing, Town Council is taking steps to ensure residents that it understands Nova Scotia's conflict of interest rules for municipal units. We're going to talk to Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton in just a moment, and she's going to tell us why the conflict of interest rules were thoroughly explained at last week's regular town council meeting in Port Hawkesbury, but also take a look at the zoning motions that came forward and have now been sent back, with a hope that the public understands better what is going on and can have input into these types of decisions. Take a look.
I think it was important for council just to have a little bit of a review with regard to, what's the procedure around declaring a conflict. Not so much with regard to, the conflict itself, just like how do you declare the conflict, as well as, what information do you need to provide to both council and members of a meeting that's in progress. So, based on the last conflict of interest, there wasn't information given with regard to the nature of the conflict of interest. So I thought it would be pertinent to have council review what is in our Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, therefore going forward that we follow the correct procedures with regard to declaring a conflict, just to make sure that everything is completely open, transparent, and that we are being as accountable as we can as elected officials for the people that have elected us to serve them for this 4-year term.
While the mayor says there wasn't any specific declaration of conflict of interest that resulted in the reading of the provincial rules at last week's monthly town council meeting, it was noted that at the May 26th public hearing on 3 proposals for rezoning in the town, Councillor Blaine Macquarie, seen here on the far right next to the mayor, did declare a conflict of interest and removed himself from the discussion at one point of the hearing. In the end, 2 of the 3 motions brought forward to this public hearing did not go forward and were instead sent back to the Planning Advisory Committee for retweaking. These would have seen residential single-unit status changed to residential 2-unit status for 3 parts of the town, specifically Grants Pond, Spruce Street, and McLaughlin Drive.
So they were moved forward with housing and our housing need in mind. The rezoning would allow residential 1 zones to have a secondary rental on their property. However, there was concern expressed from the communities that were being considered for the transition from R1 to R2. So council had the opportunity to hear from some of the concerned citizens. So for that reason, we have sent both of those requests back to the committee, the Planning Advisory Committee, for further review. So perhaps at a later date, maybe an amendment of those 2 recommendations may come back to the council table.
In the meantime, Port Hawkesbury Town Council is planning to hold final reading on the 3rd motion that came out of the May 26 public hearing. That's involving a potential craft brewery development on the waterfront in Port Hawkesbury later this summer.
Only one has moved forward to public hearing, and that is with regard to having the rezoning allow for distillery on Granville Street. So that would be the topic that we would be asking for community input with regard to the hearing that is scheduled for June 21st, 2022.
And now it's time to welcome back the head of the Cape Breton Transgender Network, Veronica Merryfield, and see what kind of answers she gives me as we play Telile 24/7's infamous Fast 5 game. And we're very pleased to welcome back to Telile 24/7 to play our infamous Fast 5 game, Veronica Merryfield, the founder of the Cape Breton Transgender Network and a board member for Cape Breton Pride. Veronica, are you all ready to play the Fast 5?
I'm ready to play the Fast 5.
All right, raring to go. Here we go. First question, coffee, tea, or neither?
Tea.
What do you take in your tea?
Milk.
Ah, nicely done. Good, good.
I'm English, come on.
Exactly. You're right. There we are. Next question. I have seen this movie 10 times. I would gladly watch it another 100. What is it?
There's several, actually, I'm afraid. The Hunt for Red October. Love Actually. Or the series Babylon 5.
Oh, my wife loves Love Actually, I will point out.
Yeah, it's a cute movie.
Yes.
You never see airport arrivals the same way.
No, you're right. Exactly. Especially when it involves the Prime Minister of a country.
Well, maybe.
Yes. All right. Third question. You can be one animal for one day. What is that animal?
I'm a giraffe. I'm already that. It's either that or I can be a dragon if we're allowed mythical ones.
We've had neither on this show
There you go.
before. I'm delighted to hear you be a giraffe or dragon, or even both. It could be
Yeah, okay, I could be both. Come on.
could be Jurassic Park. You never know. All right. Next question. Your dream vacation.
I'm already living that. I have a nice quiet space by the side of a lake.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you. Thank you. And last question on the Fast Five. Would you rather be a forest or a tree?
That's a really odd question.
I'm a really odd host.
I'll bite my tongue on that one. I'll take a tree.
All right.
I'll be a tree, standing strong.
There. And a well-dressed tree, I might add.
Always.
Yes. Thank you, Veronica Merryfield, for playing the Fast Five with us.
You're very welcome. Thank
Right.
you.
Veronica Merryfield is the head of the Cape Breton Transgender Network and a board member for Cape Breton Pride, and she is the latest victim, a volunteer of Telile 24/7's infamous Fast Five game. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and a big thank you to my interview guests this week, Veronica Merryfield, Angela MacArthur, and Brenda Chisholm-Beaton. And special thanks to my Telile colleagues, Becky Bourinot, Nick Boudreau, and Cody Pardy, for filming and formatting the interview with Veronica Merryfield at our Telile studios. And a big shout out to Cody Pardy as well for creating the new intro and closing for Telile 24/7, and for creating the great new graphic title cards you're seeing on Telile Productions at the beginning and the end over the past few weeks. If you have any thoughts or comments about what you've seen over the past hour, or you'd just like to make suggestions for future editions of Telile 24/7, I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me directly. My phone number is 902-625-8863, and you can reach me by email using the address adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Telile Community Television directly with your comments and suggestions. The station phone number in Arichat is 902-226-1928, and the best email address to use is telile@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and our YouTube channel features every single edition of Telile 24/7, including this one, as well as individual stories and interviews from our shows, and every single episode of our sister programs, Roundtable and Note Cote. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you once again for joining me for Telile 24/7. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a brand new show. Bye for now.